Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Whispers. Before the silence, our house was filled with noise. It was the beautiful, chaotic, life-affirming noise of a home with a 4-year-old girl in it. The sound of tiny feet running down the hallway, the high-pitched shriek of a laugh that was pure, uncut joy, the endless looping soundtrack of a children's movie, the quiet, murmured negotiations over just one more bedtime story. My name is Silas, and for 7 years I was a husband to my wife Isla, but my true, defining title was daddy to our daughter Lily. I was a local truck driver back then, short-haul routes that got me home every night. I did it on purpose. I had taken a pay cut to leave the long-haul life behind because I could not bear the thought of missing a single one of those sounds. My life was not measured in miles, but in the small, perfect, noisy moments that made up a family. Isla was the conductor of our beautiful orchestra. She was a woman who seemed to generate her own light, a warm, golden energy that filled every room she was in. Our love was a simple, comfortable thing, a piece of well-worn furniture that you never had to think about because it was just always there, solid and dependable. Our life was not grand, it was not dramatic. It was a collection of small, happy noises. And then, in the space of a single, screeching, horrifying second on a rain-slicked intersection just 2 blocks from our house, the music stopped. And the silence that rushed in to take its place was a physical, crushing thing. It was a weight. It was a presence. It was a monster that took up residence in our home and in our hearts. Losing a child is not an event. It is a change in the state of matter. The solid ground of your world liquefies beneath your feet, and you are left drowning in a sea of what-ifs and if-only. The house, once our sanctuary, became a torture chamber. Every room was a memory, every object a landmine of grief. Lily's small pink rain boots by the back door, her half-finished drawing of a purple giraffe still taped to the refrigerator, the faint, ghostly scent of her strawberry shampoo in the bathroom. The silence was not empty. It was full of her absence. And in that silence, Isla and I became two strangers, trapped on two separate, desolate islands with no bridge between us. We tried to talk, but our words were useless, small, hollow things against the vast, screaming emptiness. My grief was a cold, hard internal thing, a block of ice in my chest that I could not melt. I wanted to be a man of action. I wanted to build something, to fix something, to find a logical, engineering solution to an emotional problem that had no solution. Her grief was a wild, keening, untamable thing. She would weep for hours, a raw, animal sound of pure, undiluted pain that I was powerless to soothe. My attempts to comfort her felt like an insult to the scale of her sorrow. My touch felt like a trespass. We were two people staring into the same abyss, but we were seeing different things. And the more we tried to reach for each other, the wider the chasm between us seemed to grow. The house was suffocating me. Her grief was suffocating me. My own silent, screaming grief was suffocating me. I couldn't breathe the air in that place anymore. It was thick with the ghosts of the life we had lost. I had to get out. The decision, when it formed in my mind, felt less like a choice and more like a biological imperative, like the desperate need of a drowning man for air. I would go back to the road, the long haul. I framed it, to her and to myself, as an act of profound, sacrificial love. It was a story that made sense, a story that gave a noble purpose to my desperate need to flee. "I can't fix this, Isla," I told her one night, my voice a dry, broken whisper in the darkness of our bedroom, the room where we had not touched in months. "I can't make the pain go away, but I can provide. I can take the one thing I know how to do, and I can build a wall around you, a wall of financial security, so that you don't have to worry about anything, so that you can have the space, the time, so that you can heal. I will take the road. I will take the loneliness. I will carry that weight for us. You just focus on getting better." She didn't argue. She just looked at me with her hollow, haunted eyes, and she nodded. I don't know what she saw in my decision. Perhaps she saw the love and the sacrifice that I was selling. Or perhaps she saw what it really was. The desperate, terrified flight of a man who could not bear to sit in the same room as his own broken heart. The next week, I was gone. I took a job with a national carrier, a job that would keep me on the road for months at a time. As I pulled my new rig out of the depot, leaving our small, quiet town in my rearview mirror, a strange, perverse sense of relief washed over me. The crushing weight of the silence in the house was replaced by the simple, honest roar of a diesel engine. The complex, unsolvable problem of our shared grief was replaced by the simple, linear logic of the highway. I was a man with a mission again, a provider, a protector, a husband making the ultimate sacrifice for the woman he loved. I was a noble, tragic hero in a story of my own making. And the lie was so beautiful, so comforting, so necessary that I believed every single word of it. I had run away from the war, but I had convinced myself that I was just taking a different post on a lonelier, more distant front line. The road became my monastery. The long, empty hours became my meditation. I did not run from my grief out here. I simply gave it a different landscape to inhabit. It was a cleaner kind of pain. The sharp, specific agony of Lily's rain boots by the door was replaced by a vast, general, and strangely manageable melancholy. The grief was still my co-pilot, a silent, heavy presence in the passenger seat, but out here, in the endless, open spaces of the American continent, it felt less suffocating. It had room to breathe. My life became a series of monastic rituals. The pre-dawn check of the tires, the quiet coffee in a silent cab, the slow, grinding accumulation of miles. I welcomed the physical hardship, the exhaustion that would settle deep in my bones after a 16-hour day. It felt like a penance, a just and fitting punishment for a father who had outlived his child. I was paying a debt to a ghost, and the currency was my own loneliness. My only connection to the world I had left behind was the nightly phone call to Isla. Our conversations were strange, stilted affairs, two people trying to build a bridge of words across an ocean of unspoken pain. We talked about the weather, about my route, about the small, mundane details of her life at home. We never spoke of Livy. Her name was a ghost word, a void around which our entire vocabulary was carefully constructed. But I listened, with the intensity of a cryptographer, for the small signs of her healing. At first, her voice was the same as it had been, a flat, fragile, and colorless thing. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to hear a change. There was a little more strength in her tone, a little less of the hollow, echoing quality. She told me she had started tending to her garden again, the garden that had been her passion before it had become just another painful reminder. "I planted new roses today," she said one night, and the simple, domestic statement felt like a momentous victory. Then she told me about the support group. She had found a local chapter of a group for bereaved parents.
She was hesitant at first, she said, but it was helping. "They just get it, Silas," she explained, and I could hear a flicker of the old, warm Isla in her voice. "They speak the same language. We don't have to pretend." I was flooded with a profound sense of relief. This was it. This was what I had been working for. My sacrifice was paying off. I had given her the space, and in that space, she was finding a path back to life. My lonely miles suddenly felt imbued with a new, more powerful sense of purpose. I was not just a provider. I was a healer, from a great and noble distance. The name Elias first appeared about 6 months into my exile. It was just a name, dropped casually into a conversation. "Elias, the man who runs the group, he's a remarkable person," she said. "He lost his wife a few years ago. He's raising his son on his own." I felt a pang of sympathy for this unknown man. I pictured him, a sad, broken figure like myself, and I felt a sense of gratitude towards him for helping my wife. He was a fellow soldier in the same war, a brother in the geography of grief. His name began to pepper her conversations more frequently. Elias is organizing a charity auction to raise money for the children's hospital. Elias gave me a cutting from his prize-winning dahlia. Elias and his son Ben came over to help me fix the fence. In my mind, I built a picture of their relationship. I saw a pure, platonic friendship, a bond forged in the fires of a shared, unimaginable loss. I saw two survivors leaning on each other for support. I was not jealous. I was grateful. He was there, on the ground, providing a kind of emotional support that I, 1,000 miles away, could not. He was my proxy, my representative in the world of her healing. I was so secure in my own narrative, in the story of my noble sacrifice, that I was completely blind to the story that was actually being written. I was the tragic hero, working in the shadows. He was just a supporting character. The thought that he could be anything more was a possibility my mind simply refused to entertain. The illusion was too important. It was the entire foundation of my life on the road. For 2 years, this was my reality. I hauled my freight, I sent my money home, I listened to my wife's slow, steady recovery over the phone. I was a ghost, a benefactor, a man who had successfully martyred himself for the sake of his wife's well-being. I had achieved a state of quiet, sorrowful equilibrium. The signal that it was time to come home was a phone call on a Tuesday evening in May. I was in a truck stop in Utah, looking out at a desert sunset that was a brutal, beautiful, and painful reminder of the beauty that still existed in the world. Her voice on the phone was different. It was not just stronger, it was happy. It was a sound I had not heard in so long I almost didn't recognize it. "I went for a hike today, Silas," she said, her voice full of a breathless, vibrant energy. "Up to Eagle Peak. The wildflowers are all in bloom." It was beautiful. She had not been able to go on that hike since Lily's death. It had been their place. Her ability to go back there, to find beauty in a place that had been a source of so much pain, was a sign. It was a declaration of victory. I think I'm okay, Silas," she whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of release. "I think we're going to be okay." That was it. That was the signal I had been waiting for 2 long, lonely years. My penance was over. Her healing was complete. It was time to go home. It was time to see if the 2 broken pieces of our lives could be put back together again. I told my dispatcher I was taking an extended leave. I deadheaded my rig back to the main depot, a 2-day drive that felt like the longest and most hopeful journey of my life. I was not just driving a truck. I was driving towards the future, towards the life I had earned with my own quiet and profound sacrifice. I pictured our reunion. It would be awkward at first, of course. We were 2 strangers who would need to learn how to speak to each other again. But we would do it. We would rebuild. The foundation of our love, I believed, was still there, buried beneath the rubble of our grief. We just had to start digging. The drive home, the final leg of the journey, was filled with the nervous, hopeful, and almost unbearable sense of anticipation. I was a soldier, coming home from a long and terrible war, ready to finally live in peace. The last few miles felt like a dream. The familiar landmarks of my hometown, the streets I could navigate with my eyes closed, all seemed new and strange, viewed through the lens of my long absence. I was a time traveler, returning to a place I had only ever visited in my memories. I didn't call Isla to tell her I was coming. I wanted it to be a gentle surprise, a quiet arrival, not a grand, momentous event. I wanted to just appear, to slip back into the life that was waiting for me. I parked my pickup truck at the end of our quiet, tree-lined street, and I walked the last 100 yards. The house looked perfect. The lawn was neatly mowed. The rose bushes she had planted were a riot of color. It looked like a house where a happy, normal life was being lived. It looked like a house that had healed. I used my key, the key that felt heavy and foreign in my hand. I opened the door. "Isla?" I called out, my voice a strange, rusty sound in the quiet of the house. "I'm home." I heard a small gasp from the direction of the living room. And then she appeared in the doorway. She was a vision. The haunted, hollow-eyed woman from my memories was gone. In her place was the Isla I remembered, the vibrant, glowing woman I had fallen in love with. She was healthy, she was whole, she was beautiful. My sacrifice had worked. My heart swelled with the feeling of such profound, triumphant love that it almost brought me to my knees. And then another figure appeared behind her in the doorway. A man. He was tall, with kind, tired eyes and a gentle smile. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of such easy, comfortable intimacy that it was not a trespass. It was a statement of fact.
And I saw, in the way she leaned into his touch, in the way their bodies seemed to fit together in a space that had once been mine, that my sacrifice had not just healed her, it had replaced me. The man, of course, was Elias. I knew his face from a photograph I had seen on the support group's website, a photograph I had looked at with a feeling of detached, comradely sympathy. Seeing him in the flesh, in my house, with his hand on my wife's shoulder, was a different experience entirely. He was not a sad, broken fellow traveler. He was the new inhabitant of a country I had abdicated. The silence in the hallway was a thick, suffocating thing. Isla stared at me, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Elias looked from her to me, a dawning, horrified understanding on his face. He was not a villain. He was not a predator. He was a decent man who had just stumbled into the final, terrible scene of a play he had not known he was a part of. It was Isla who finally broke the silence. "Silas," she whispered, her voice a fragile, broken thing. You're home." "I am," I said, my own voice a dead, hollow echo. I was home. But I was the one who was the guest here. I was the ghost here. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. The shock was too profound, too deep. It was a catastrophic system failure that was beyond the capacity of a simple emotional overload. The engineer in me took over, the part of my brain that, in the face of an unthinkable structural collapse, just starts quietly, methodically assessing the damage. I looked around the living room behind them. It was our living room, but it was different. The heavy, dark furniture I had chosen was gone, replaced by lighter, more modern pieces. There were new paintings on the walls, abstract and full of color, nothing like the muted landscapes we had once favored. And on the mantelpiece, where our wedding photograph had always sat, there was now a new photograph. It was a picture of the three of them, Isla, Elias, and a smiling teenage boy who I knew must be his son, Ben. They were on a beach, their arms around each other. They looked like a family. They looked happy. They looked right. And in that moment, I saw the full, terrible, and heartbreaking truth of my own decision. I had not created a space for her to heal. I had created a vacuum. And a vacuum, by its very nature, demands to be filled. I had believed myself to be the hero of the story, the noble, sacrificing martyr. But from her perspective, from the perspective of the woman left behind in the silent, grief-stricken house, I was not a hero. I was a man who had run away. I had fled the messy, unbearable, day-to-day reality of our shared grief, and I had left her to face it alone. I had chosen the clean, simple pain of the road over the complicated, agonizing work of grieving together. And into that void, into that space I had abdicated, this man had walked. A man who had not run from his own grief. A man who had stayed.
A man who knew the language of loss because he was a native speaker. A man who could sit with her in the silence and not be terrified by it. He had not stolen my wife. I had given her away. We should talk, Ela stammered, her hand going to her throat, a gesture of pure, panicked guilt. I think you've said everything you need to say, I replied, my voice a quiet, calm, and utterly defeated thing. There was nothing to talk about. The evidence was all around me. It was in the new furniture, in the painting on the wall, in the photograph on the mantelpiece. It was in the way his hand still rested on her shoulder, a gesture of unconscious protective ownership. I was not there to negotiate the terms of a surrender. The war had been over for a long time. I just hadn't received the memo. I looked at Elias. I looked into his kind, sad eyes, and I saw not an enemy, but a man who was a mirror of myself, a man whose life had also been shattered by loss. We were two sides of the same coin. He was the one who had stayed. I was the one who had left, and she had chosen the man who had stayed. I turned and I walked out the door. I did not slam it. I closed it quietly behind me, the soft click of the latch, the final, gentle sound of a life ending. I walked back down the street to my truck. I got in. I sat there for a long time, staring at the perfect, beautiful house where my wife now lived with her new, better family. I felt no anger. I felt no hatred. I felt only a vast, profound, and strangely peaceful sense of loss. My sacrifice had not been a sacrifice. It had been a mistake. A terrible, tragic, and well-intentioned mistake. I had thought I was giving her the world, but I had only been giving her away. I started the truck, and I drove. I had no destination. I was just a man in a truck on a road. But this time, I was not running away from something. I was driving towards it, towards the terrifying, unknown, and completely empty landscape of a life that was, for the first time, entirely and only my own. The road is a different country when you have no destination. It is no longer a series of lines connecting two points, a problem to be solved with fuel and time and logbooks. It becomes a place in and of itself. For 2 months, I drifted. I took random jobs, short hauls to cities I had never heard of. I was a ghost, a man without a past, without a future, a creature of the perpetual, humming present of the highway. I was not running. I was floating. I was a piece of wreckage cast loose from a ship that had gone down, and I was simply letting the currents of the road take me where they would. During this time, I had one final logistical conversation with Ela. It was conducted through our lawyers. The divorce was a quiet, uncontested affair. I gave her the house. I gave her the majority of the savings. I didn't do it out of love or guilt. I did it as a final act of engineering. The structure of our marriage had failed, and this was simply the process of clearing the site. To fight over the rubble would have been a pointless emotional exercise, and I was done with emotions. I was a man who now only believed in the clean, hard, and undeniable physics of a world that had moved on. My own pain was a quiet, constant companion. It was no longer the sharp, acute agony of a fresh wound, but the dull, chronic ache of a poorly set bone. I had learned to live with it. It was a part of my new geography, a mountain range on my internal map that I had to navigate around every day. The turning point, the moment the currents began to shift, was not a grand cinematic event. It was a small, quiet moment in a place as anonymous and as forgettable as any other. It was a truck stop diner in Eastern Oregon. I was sitting at the counter, staring into a cup of black coffee, when a young couple came in with their daughter, a little girl who was maybe 4 or 5 years old. She had the same wild curly hair that Lily had had, and she was crying, a loud, hiccuping, heartbroken sob because she had dropped her ice cream cone on the pavement outside. Her parents were trying to comfort her, but she was inconsolable. And as I sat there, listening to the sound of her grief,
A sound that would have once sent me fleeing into the night. I felt something new, something other than the dull ache of my own loss. I felt a flicker of empathy. I got up. I walked over to their booth. The parents looked up at me, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and wariness at this strange, road-worn man approaching their table. I looked at the little girl. "It's a very sad thing to lose an ice cream cone," I said, my voice quiet. She looked up at me, her big, tear-filled eyes full of a profound 4-year-old sorrow. "It was strawberry," she whispered, as if that were the most tragic detail of all. "Strawberry is the best kind," I agreed. "I'll tell you what. I think the ice cream machine here owes you a new one, on me." I went to the counter and I bought her a new ice cream cone, a towering, ridiculous swirl of strawberry soft serve. I brought it back to her. Her face, as she took it, was a study in pure, unadulterated wonder. The storm of her grief had passed as quickly as it had arrived, replaced by the brilliant, shining sun of a new ice cream cone. I went back to my counter seat and I drank my coffee. The parents came over before they left. The father put a hand on my shoulder. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of a simple, genuine gratitude. That was a very kind thing to do." I just nodded. After they left, I sat there for a long time. It was a small thing, a $5 gesture, but it felt like a monumental act. For the first time in 2 years, I had stepped outside the sealed, airtight container of my own grief, and I had connected, in a small, fleeting way, with someone else's. I had not run from the sound of a child's pain. I had walked towards it, and in doing so, I had discovered that it had not destroyed me. That small, simple act was a key. It unlocked a door in a room I had thought was permanently sealed. I realized that my flight to the road had been a flight from shared human experience. I had been so terrified of the pain of connection that I had chosen the sterile safety of complete isolation. But connection was not just about pain. It was also about strawberry ice cream. It was about the simple, uncomplicated kindness of strangers. It was about the small, quiet moments that make up the real, messy, and beautiful business of being alive. I sold my truck. It was a hard thing to do, like saying goodbye to the only home, the only identity I had known for years. But it was no longer my sanctuary. It was my prison. And I was finally, truly ready to be free. I took the money from the sale, and I bought a small piece of land in that same corner of Eastern Oregon, a place of high deserts and vast open skies. It was a place that felt quiet, but not lonely. And I began to build something, with my own 2 hands. I started with a small workshop, a place for my tools. I was an engineer, a man who had spent his life designing things for other people. Now, I was going to design something for myself. I didn't know what I was building yet. A house, maybe? A life, probably. But for the first time, I was not building it as a sacrifice or as a monument to a ghost. I was building it for the simple, quiet, and profoundly satisfying reason of seeing something new and whole rise up from the bare, empty ground. I still think about Isla. I do not know what became of her and Elias. I hope that found a kind of peace together in their shared tragic language. But I am no longer fluent in that language. I am learning a new one. It is a quiet language, a language of solitude and the wind in the sagebrush. It is a language of healing, a process that is slow and patient and as unpredictable as the weather. It is the language of a man who is learning, one day at a time, how to build a home not for a family, but for himself. And it is a language that, for the first time in a very long time, sounds like hope. Thank you for tuning in to Reddit Whispers. We've all faced moments when everything felt broken. What was your turning point? Leave it in the comments.